The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. when I gave up pretending to sleep. Vera's side of the bed remained untouched, sheets still tucked military tight from this morning. Another mentoring weekend with Charles Mercer, her silver-haired SVP who seemed to have an unusual interest in developing talent after business hours. I padded downstairs to my basement office, the one room in our pristine suburban home where I could think without Vera's corporate motivational posters staring at me. 15 years of marriage, and I'd become an expert at reading the signs. The late-night phone calls that ended when I entered the room, the sudden wardrobe upgrades, the way she'd started pronouncing networking like it was a sacred ritual. My laptop hummed to life, casting blue light across stacks of client files. As an IT consultant, I'd learned that data never lies, unlike people. I pulled up our shared calendar, noting the pattern I'd been tracking for months. Every leadership retreat coincided with Vera's promotions. Every strategic planning session preceded a raise announcement. The front door clicked open upstairs. Vera's heels tapped across the hardwood, each step deliberate and measured. She was trying not to wake me, which meant she was trying not to explain where she'd been. I closed the laptop and waited. Her gym bag hit the kitchen counter with a soft thud. Through the thin ceiling, I heard her phone buzz, a text arriving at 3 a.m. The refrigerator door opened, closed, ice clinked in a glass, the ritual of someone washing away evidence. 20 minutes later, the house fell silent again. I gave it another hour before creeping upstairs. Vera's gym bag sat beside the kitchen island, unzipped and careless. Inside, I found the usual suspects: yoga pants that looked too clean, a water bottle that smelled like wine, and a hotel keycard wedged between her makeup compact and phone charger. The Meridian Hotel, downtown, presidential suite access. My hands trembled as I photographed the keycard with my phone. The magnetic stripe caught the kitchen light, innocent as a credit card but loaded with implications. I'd driven past the Meridian countless times, never imagining my wife had reason to visit their penthouse level. A lipstick-stained wine glass peeked from the bag's side pocket. The shade was wrong. Too dark, too bold for Vera's usual corporate palette. Beside it, a silver necklace I'd never seen, delicate and expensive, the kind of gift that comes with expectations. My phone buzzed. A text notification from Vera's tablet synced to our home network. "Thanks for last night, V. Next time my wife won't be home. C." The message hung on the screen like a confession. Charles Mercer, the mentor who'd fast-tracked Vera's career from middle management to senior director in 18 months. The married executive who'd somehow found time to personally guide my wife through every promotion while his own team struggled for his attention. I screenshot the message, my finger shaking against the glass. The timestamp read 3:23 a.m., sent while Vera was downstairs washing wine glasses and arranging alibis. The pieces clicked together with mechanical precision. Weekend retreats that never appeared on corporate calendars. Raises that arrived Monday morning after Sunday night conferences. The way Vera's eyes lit up when Charles called. The same light that used to be reserved for me. I opened our phone plan's location tracking app, something we'd enabled years ago for convenience. Vera's phone showed its current location, not at any corporate retreat center, but at a downtown penthouse address I recognized from the city's most expensive residential listings, Charles Mercer's private residence. The screenshot captured everything: the pin on the map, the timestamp, the address that matched property records I pulled up in another browser window. Charles and Frances Mercer, married 24 years, owners of a corner penthouse worth more than our entire neighborhood. Frances Mercer, the wife who probably had her own questions about her husband's dedication to mentoring. I sat in the dark kitchen, surrounded by evidence and possibility. The keycard lay beside my phone, both pieces of a puzzle I'd been unconsciously assembling for months. Vera's rapid ascent through corporate ranks suddenly made perfect sense, and perfect revenge material. My mind raced through options, each more satisfying than the last. But rushing and angry would only give them time to spin stories and cover tracks. This required patience, planning, and probably an ally who had as much to gain from the truth as I did. Frances Mercer, a woman who deserved to know where her husband spent his mentoring hours. I photographed everything: the keycard, the necklace, the wine glass, the text message, the location data. Each image was a weapon waiting to be deployed. Then I carefully returned everything to Vera's bag, exactly as I'd found it. Tomorrow, I'd start building my case. Tonight, I'd finally gotten my first real evidence that my suspicions weren't paranoia. They were preparation for war. The clock read 4:15 a.m. when I finally returned to bed. Vera slept peacefully beside me, her phone dark and silent on the nightstand. She looked innocent in the dim light, like the woman I'd married before ambition and Charles Mercer reshaped her priorities. But innocence was a luxury neither of us could afford anymore. Francis Mercer's call came Tuesday morning while I debugged a client's network security system. The voice was crisp, professional, with an edge that suggested she didn't make social calls. "Mr. Weston, this is Francis Mercer. I believe we need to discuss our spouse's professional relationship." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" "Charles Mercer's wife. Your Vera has been spending considerable time at our home lately. More than I have, actually. I thought we might compare notes." The words hit like ice water. She knew. Francis Mercer knew exactly what was happening, and she was ready to do something about it. "When can we meet?" I asked. "Tonight. Brennan's Diner on 5th Street. 9 o'clock. Come alone and bring whatever evidence you've gathered. I assume you've been gathering evidence." The line went quiet. No goodbye, no pleasantries. Just the click of someone who'd made a decision and intended to follow through. I spent the day reviewing my documentation, screenshots, location data, calendar inconsistencies, everything I'd collected over 3 months of growing suspicion. By evening, I had a folder thick enough to choke a lawyer. Brennan's Diner occupied a corner lot between a dry cleaner and a used bookstore, the kind of place where conversations disappeared into background noise. Frances sat in a back booth, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed documents spread across the table. She looked up when I approached. "Malcolm Weston." "Call me Mal." I slid into the opposite seat, noting the precision with which she'd organized her materials. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records. Frances had been busy. "I'm a corporate attorney," she said without preamble. 26 years of marriage taught me to document everything. Charles thinks I don't notice his patterns, but patterns are what I do for a living. She pushed a photograph across the table. Charles and Vera entering the Meridian Hotel, his hand on her lower back, both dressed for business but walking like lovers. "Taken last Thursday," Frances continued, "the same day Charles told me he was dining with the board of directors. Except the board meeting was canceled, and restaurant receipts show a party of 2, not 12. I opened my folder, spreading my own evidence beside hers. Phone records, location data, the hotel keycard photo, screenshots of late-night texts. The pieces formed a timeline of deception that stretched back nearly 2 years. "Look at this," I said, pointing to Vera's promotion dates on a printed calendar. "Every advancement comes exactly 1 week after a weekend conference. And here?" I showed her Charles's corporate credit card statements, suite charges at the Meridian that match every single retreat weekend. Frances studied the documents with professional focus. The amounts are significant. Presidential suite, room service, spa charges. He's not just mentoring her, he's courting her. The question is what we do about it. She leaned back, removing her glasses to clean them with deliberate precision. I've been asking myself that for weeks. Confrontation seems obvious, but it's also temporary. They apologize, promise to stop, then find subtler ways to continue. I want something more permanent. Like what? Complete exposure, professional consequences, social embarrassment, the kind of revelation that makes continuing impossible because everyone knows the truth. Her words carried the weight of someone who'd thought this through from every angle. Frances wasn't just angry, she was strategic. "Charles has a board review next month," she continued. "His performance evaluation includes a section on professional ethics and appropriate workplace relationships. If the right information reached the right people..." "Vera's up for senior vice president," I added. "The promotion she's been working toward for 2 years, the one Charles has been promising her." We spent the next hour comparing evidence, filling gaps in each other's timelines. Frances had documentation I'd missed, restaurant receipts, travel records, even security footage from their building that showed Vera leaving Charles's office after hours. I had the digital trail, text messages, location data, the electronic breadcrumbs that painted a picture of systematic deception. "We need more," Frances said finally. "Enough evidence that denial becomes impossible. Something so comprehensive that HR has no choice but to act." "What are you thinking?" "Direct observation, recording their next meeting, getting them on record, discussing their arrangement." The idea was risky, but logical. "Vera thinks she's going to another leadership retreat this weekend. Charles told her it's a special strategy session for senior-level candidates." Frances smiled, the expression sharp as broken glass. "He told me he's visiting his mother in Phoenix. She's been gone for 3 years." We shook hands across the table, sealing an alliance born of mutual betrayal. Frances gathered her documents with the same precision she'd displayed them, every paper returned to its proper folder. "One more thing," she said as we prepared to leave. "Whatever we discover, whatever we decide to do with it, we do it together. Neither of us acts alone until we both agree on the approach. Agreed. When do we start? They're meeting tomorrow night. Charles thinks I'm at a conference in Chicago. Vera probably has her own cover story. I nodded. Tomorrow night we'd get the evidence we needed, and then we'd decide exactly how to use it. The parking lot was nearly empty as we walked to our cars. Frances moved with the confidence of someone who'd made peace with what came next, regardless of the personal cost. "Frances," I called as she reached her sedan. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" She paused, key in hand. "Because 26 years of marriage deserves better than lies, and because some betrayals require consequences." She drove away, leaving me alone under the diner's neon sign. The night air was cool, carrying the promise of autumn and change. Tomorrow, Vera would come home with another story about leadership development and strategic planning. But tomorrow, I'd finally have proof of what she was really learning. The Meridian Hotel's service entrance buzzed with Thursday evening activity. Catering staff wheeled carts toward freight elevators while housekeeping shuttled between floors, invisible to guests who paid premium prices for seamless service. I'd spent 2 days studying their patterns, timing my approach for maximum anonymity. Shiv, the gym's front desk coordinator and part-time hotel security consultant, had provided the crucial detail. Service elevators accessed every floor, including the penthouse level with the right keycard. The same keycard that had appeared in Vera's gym bag 3 nights ago. Frances waited in her car across the street, monitoring Charles's location through the family plan tracking app. Her text confirmed what we'd expected. Target acquired, penthouse level, package delivered 20 minutes ago. Package being Vera, who'd left our house at 6:30 wearing her best business attire and carrying an overnight bag she'd packed with unusual care. I adjusted the small recording device Frances had provided, legal in our state for documenting conversations involving consenting parties. Since they'd involved me in their deception by lying about their whereabouts, I qualified as an affected party with legitimate interest in the truth. The service elevator carried me to the 23rd floor without challenge. Hotel staff moved through corridors with practiced efficiency, too focused on their duties to question another uniformed figure carrying a maintenance clipboard. Charles's penthouse occupied the corner suite, its double doors marked with discrete brass numbers. I'd memorized the floor plan from the hotel's website, noting the layout that placed the living area adjacent to floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Voices carried through the door. Vera's laugh, bright and musical, followed by Charles's deeper response. They sounded relaxed, comfortable, like people who'd done this many times before. I pressed the recording device against the door frame, adjusting the sensitivity until their conversation became clear. "The board meeting went well," Charles was saying. "Henderson asked specifically about your strategic analysis project. I told him you'd present it personally next month." "You mean the promotion is definite?" Vera's voice carried excitement that made my chest tighten. This was the career advancement she'd been working toward for 2 years, the opportunity that would establish her as a senior executive. "As definite as these things get. Assuming you continue to demonstrate the same level of dedication." "You know I will. This means everything to me, Charles. Everything." The conversation shifted, their voices moving away from the door. I caught fragments, discussion of weekend plans, mentions of his wife's travel schedule, Vera's concerns about maintaining discretion. Then Vera's voice, sharp with sudden anger. "What do you mean, reconsider? We had an agreement." "Keep your voice down." Charles sounded strained. "The situation has become complicated. Frances has been asking questions about my schedule. And your husband called the office yesterday, asking about conference locations." My heart hammered against my ribs. They knew. Somehow they'd detected my investigation. "Malcolm doesn't suspect anything," Vera said, but uncertainty colored her tone. "He's been distracted with his own projects." "Has he? Then why did he ask Jennifer about leadership retreat venues? Why is he suddenly interested in your professional development?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if they'd moved to another room. Then Vera spoke again, her voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "If you're getting nervous, just say so. But don't pretend this is about my husband's curiosity. You promised me senior vice president. You promised me the Henderson account. If you're backing out now, I'm not backing out. I'm being cautious. There's a difference." "Cautious? You weren't cautious when you were explaining how mentoring relationships work. You weren't cautious when you outlined exactly what kind of dedication would fast-track my career." The words hit like physical blows. Vera wasn't just having an affair. She was negotiating career advancement through calculated intimacy. The woman I'd married had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who treated professional success like a transaction. "Don't make this sound sordid," Charles said. "We both benefited from our arrangement. Your performance improved dramatically once you understood what executive leadership required." My performance improved because you gave me opportunities other people didn't get. Access to client meetings, strategic planning sessions, budget discussions, the kind of exposure that builds careers. And you earned that access. I paid for that access. There's a difference. Their voices moved closer to the door again. I pressed the recorder tighter against the frame, capturing every word of their argument. Look, Charles continued, the promotion is yours. The Henderson account is yours. But we need to be more careful about appearances. Maybe space out our meetings, vary the locations. Or maybe you're worried your wife is smarter than you think. The silence that followed was loaded with implication. Charles knew Frances suspected something. The question was how much and what she intended to do about it. Frances is focused on her own career, he said finally. She doesn't have time to monitor mine. Famous last words, Vera replied. You better hope you're right, because if this arrangement becomes public knowledge, I'm not the only one who loses everything. Footsteps approached the door. I grabbed the recorder and moved quickly toward the service elevator, my heart racing as the penthouse door opened behind me. I'll call you tomorrow, Charles said. We'll figure out the next steps then. The elevator doors closed just as Vera emerged into the corridor, her business attire wrinkled, her expression troubled. She didn't see me, but I saw everything I needed to see. Frances was waiting in the parking garage when I reached ground level. Her face was tense, expectant. Well? She asked as I got into her car. I played back the recording, watching her expression harden as Vera and Charles discussed their arrangement in clinical terms. The negotiation of career advancement through personal compromise, the casual dismissal of their spouse's intelligence, the arrogant assumption that they could continue indefinitely without consequences. Bastards, Frances said when the recording ended. Both of them. The question is what we do with this. She started the engine, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. We destroy them. Professionally, socially, completely. They want to play games with other people's lives? Fine. But they are going to learn that some games have permanent consequences. As we drove through the city streets, Frances outlined her plan. Board presentations, HR complaints, strategic leaks to industry contacts, a coordinated assault that would leave both Charles and Vera professionally radioactive. When do we start? I asked. Tomorrow. Charles has a client presentation at 10. Vera has her monthly team meeting at 2. By 5 o'clock, their careers will be over. The recording device felt warm in my pocket, loaded with evidence that would reshape 4 lives by weekend's end. Frances was right. Some games had permanent consequences. And tomorrow, Charles and Vera would learn exactly what those consequences looked like. The Pinnacle Corporation's glass tower reflected Friday morning sunlight like a beacon of corporate ambition. I'd visited Vera's office twice before, company picnics and holiday parties where spouses were expected to smile and network. Today, I carried a manila folder thick with documentation and a recording device that would reshape the executive landscape. Frances had coordinated our timing with military precision. Charles's board presentation would begin at 10, giving us a 2-hour window before Vera's team meeting. Enough time to plant seeds that would bloom into career-ending revelations by afternoon. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, where Vera's HR department occupied a maze of cubicles and conference rooms. The receptionist, a young woman named Jennifer, who'd always been friendly at company events, looked surprised to see me. Mal, what brings you here? Vera's in meetings all morning? Actually, I'm here about the meetings, the leadership retreats and conference weekends. I have some questions about corporate policy. Jennifer's expression shifted, professional courtesy replacing personal warmth. What kind of questions? I opened the folder, removing copies of hotel receipts, calendar inconsistencies, and location data. Nothing explicit, but enough to establish a pattern that demanded explanation. These are dates when Vera attended leadership development sessions. I'm trying to reconcile them with our family calendar, but the locations and expenses don't match any corporate training programs I can find. Jennifer studied the documents, her frown deepening. These retreats aren't on our official calendar, and the expenses... She looked up. Mal, you might want to speak with someone in compliance. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Within 20 minutes, I sat across from Patricia Hendricks, the compliance director whose job involved investigating exactly the kind of irregularities I'd documented. Patricia was thorough, methodical, and visibly disturbed by the evidence I presented. Mr. Weston, these allegations are serious. If you're suggesting that an executive is using corporate resources for unauthorized purposes, or that career advancement is being tied to inappropriate relationships, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm presenting documentation and asking questions. The conclusions are yours to draw. She photocopied everything, her expression growing grimmer with each page. Hotel suites charged to Charles's corporate card. Weekend retreats that coincided with Vera's promotions. A pattern of behavior that violated multiple company policies. "I'll need to investigate this immediately," Patricia said. "Can you be available for follow-up questions?" "Absolutely. And Patricia, there might be other people with similar concerns, other spouses who've noticed unusual patterns." I left the compliance office knowing that wheels were now in motion. Patricia Hendricks had built her career on rooting out corporate misconduct. She wouldn't let this slide, especially with documentation this comprehensive. My phone buzzed as I reached the parking garage. Francis, texting from Charles's board presentation, "Package delivered. Fireworks expected within the hour." Francis had taken a more direct approach. While I planted seeds with compliance, she'd walked into Charles's board presentation and requested a private word with the chairman. The folder she carried contained everything we'd gathered: recordings, photographs, financial documentation, and a timeline that painted Charles as a predator who'd weaponized mentorship for personal gratification. I drove to a coffee shop across from Pinnacle's tower and waited. Through the window, I could see the building's glass facade, imagining the chaos unfolding inside as two separate investigations converged on the same targets. At 11:47, my phone rang. Vera, her voice tight with panic. "Mal, I need you to come to the office right now. There's been some kind of misunderstanding, and they're asking questions about my training schedule." "What kind of questions?" "About the leadership retreats, about Charles. Someone's been spreading lies, and I need you to verify my whereabouts for certain dates." The irony was perfect. Vera wanted me to provide alibis for meetings that had never happened, to corroborate lies I'd spent months documenting. "I'll be right there," I said. But instead of driving to Pinnacle, I called Francis. "How's the board presentation going?" "Charles excused himself 20 minutes ago. Emergency call from HR, apparently. I think our timing was perfect." "Vera just called. They're asking her about the retreats." "Good. Let them ask. By the time Patricia finishes her investigation, they'll have answers to questions they didn't even know to ask." I spent the next hour monitoring social media, watching as news of the investigation leaked through corporate networks. Janine, Vera's ambitious colleague who'd always resented her rapid advancement, was particularly active on LinkedIn. Interesting developments in executive leadership today. Sometimes mentorship programs yield unexpected results. At our corporate accountability and leadership y incredible truth. The post had 17 comments within minutes, each one speculating about which executives might be involved. Corporate gossip moved faster than official communications, and Vera's name was already circulating as a person of interest. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Vera. "They've suspended me pending investigation. Come home. We need to talk." The message carried a finality that suggested she knew exactly how much trouble she was in. Suspended pending investigation meant Patricia had found enough evidence to warrant immediate action. It meant Charles was probably facing similar consequences. I drove home slowly, savoring the moment. For months, I'd watched Vera build her career on lies and manipulation. She'd traded intimacy for advancement, treating our marriage like an inconvenient obstacle to her professional ambitions. Now the bill had come due. Vera's car sat in our driveway, parked at an angle that suggested hasty arrival. Through the living room window, I could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling lawyers or trying to reach Charles. I sat in my car for a moment, preparing for the confrontation I'd been planning for weeks. The folder beside me contained copies of everything, insurance against whatever story Vera might try to construct. The recording device was still in my pocket, ready to document whatever lies she planned to tell. Some conversations required evidence, and this conversation would determine whether our marriage ended with honesty or dissolved in the same deception that had defined it for the past 2 years. I took a deep breath and walked toward the house, ready to hear what Vera thought she could say to explain away the evidence that had already destroyed her career. Vera stood at our living room window, still wearing her business suit but with her jacket discarded on the couch. Her phone lay silent on the coffee table. Either the calls had stopped, or she'd given up making them. "They fired me," she said without turning around. "Effective immediately. Escorted out by security like a common criminal." I set my keys on the entrance table, noting the way she held herself. Shoulders rigid, posture defensive. Even caught in lies, Vera was preparing to fight rather than confess. What did they say exactly? Violation of corporate policy. Inappropriate relationship with a superior. Misuse of company resources. She finally turned to face me. "They had documentation, Mal. Receipts, photographs, recordings. Someone's been building a case against me for months." Maybe because there was a case to build. Her eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what it takes to succeed in that environment. The politics, the competition, the way women have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. So you decided to work horizontally instead? The words hit like a slap. Vera's face flushed red, her hands clenching into fists. It wasn't like that. Charles saw my potential when nobody else would. He gave me opportunities, mentorship, access to projects that showcased my abilities. In exchange for what? In exchange for dedication, for proving I was serious about advancement, for showing I understood how executive relationships work. I pulled out my phone, opening the recording app I'd been running since entering the house. Tell me how executive relationships work, Vera. Explain it to me like I'm stupid. She began pacing again, her heels clicking against hardwood. You wouldn't understand. You've never worked in corporate environment. You don't know what it's like to compete at that level. Try me. Fine. Charles recognized my talent early. He invited me to strategy meetings, included me in client presentations, recommended me for high visibility projects. But that kind of access comes with expectations. What kind of expectations? Loyalty, discretion, understanding that mentorship is a personal relationship, not just professional. That successful executives know how to build connections that go beyond conference rooms and quarterly reports. The euphemisms were breathtaking. Vera had constructed an entire vocabulary to avoid acknowledging what she'd actually done. And the hotel rooms? The weekend retreats that never appeared on corporate calendars? She stopped pacing, her expression shifting from defensive to calculating. Those were private strategy sessions, one-on-one development opportunities that couldn't happen in the office environment. Development of what, exactly? My leadership skills, my understanding of executive decision-making, my ability to handle sensitive client relationships. I laughed, the sound bitter in the quiet room. Vera, just stop. I know about the Meridian Hotel. I know about the presidential suite charges. I know about the necklace in your gym bag and the text messages at 3 a.m. Her face went pale. You've been spying on me. I've been documenting your lies. There's a difference. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Frances, her timing perfect as always. Excuse me, I said to Vera, answering the call on speaker. How did your conversation go? Frances's voice filled the room, crisp and professional. Charles tried to deny everything until I played the recording. Then he tried to blame Vera, claiming she initiated the relationship and pursued him aggressively. Vera's eyes widened as she realized who was speaking. Frances Mercer, I explained. Charles's wife. We've been comparing notes. Hello, Vera, Frances said through the phone. I thought you should know that Charles threw you completely under the bus. According to him, you seduced him, threatened to file harassment charges if he didn't promote you, and manipulated him into providing career opportunities through emotional blackmail. That's not true, Vera shouted toward the phone. He approached me. He's the one who explained how mentorship worked, who outlined what dedication meant, who promised advancement in exchange for loyalty. So you admit there was an exchange? Frances asked. Career advancement in return for personal loyalty? Vera's mouth opened and closed without sound. She'd just confessed to exactly what Charles was denying, creating contradictory stories that would destroy both their credibility. Charles also mentioned that you two discussed framing Mal for financial irregularities if the relationship ever came to light, Frances continued. Something about corporate credit card misuse and unauthorized expense reports. The room seemed to tilt. What? Oh yes, Frances said. Apparently you were Plan B if the affair became public. Charles had already prepared documentation showing suspicious charges on accounts you had access to through Vera's corporate card. If anyone asked uncomfortable questions, you'd become the scapegoat. I looked at Vera, seeing her expression confirm what Frances was saying. They hadn't just betrayed our marriages. They'd planned to destroy me if their deception was discovered. Is that true? I asked. Vera's silence was answer enough. Well, Frances continued, that plan is somewhat complicated now that Charles has been terminated and escorted from the building. Hard to frame someone when you no longer have access to corporate systems. He was fired too? Immediately. The board doesn't tolerate executives who weaponize mentorship for personal gratification, especially when it involves misuse of corporate resources and potential fraud. Vera sank onto the couch, her composure finally cracking. This is insane. We're both adults. What we did was consensual. Nobody was harmed. Nobody was harmed? I stared at her. You were planning to frame me for corporate fraud. You've been lying to me for 2 years. You traded our marriage for career advancement and then tried to set me up as a fall guy when it went wrong. I never meant for it to go this far. But you meant for it to go somewhere. You meant to keep lying, keep manipulating, keep treating our marriage like an inconvenience to your professional ambitions. Francis's voice cut through the tension. Vera, I'm curious about something. When did you realize that Charles was married? When did you decide that destroying 2 marriages was an acceptable price for senior vice president? I didn't destroy anything. Charles and I developed feelings for each other. It happens in professional environments. Successful people form connections. Successful people also face consequences, Francis replied. Which brings me to why I called. Mal, the board asked me to provide a comprehensive report about Charles's conduct. They're particularly interested in any evidence of a pattern of behavior with female employees. A pattern? Apparently, Vera wasn't the first promising junior executive to benefit from Charles's special mentorship program. The investigation is expanding to include other relationships, other promotions that might have involved similar arrangements. Vera's face went white. Other relationships. Did you think you were special? Francis asked. Did you imagine that Charles had never used career advancement as leverage before? The board has already identified 3 other women who received unusual promotions after private mentoring sessions with your boyfriend. The revelation hit Vera like a physical blow. She thought she was participating in a unique relationship, a special connection that justified betraying her marriage. Instead, she'd been the latest in a series of women who'd traded intimacy for advancement with a predator who'd perfected the system. I need to call my lawyer, Vera said weakly. Good idea, Francis replied. You'll probably need one. The company is conducting a full audit of all promotions and raises associated with Charles's recommendations. If they find evidence of quid pro quo arrangements, there could be legal consequences beyond just termination. The call ended, leaving Vera and me alone in the sudden silence. She sat motionless on the couch, staring at her hands, probably calculating how completely her life had just collapsed. So what now? I asked. She looked up, her eyes red with unshed tears. I don't know. I honestly don't know. For the first time in months, Vera was telling the truth, but truth was a luxury that came too late to save anything worth preserving. The Riverside Business Awards Gala was the kind of event Vera had always loved. 500 of the city's most influential professionals gathered to celebrate corporate excellence and network over premium wine. She'd been scheduled to receive the Rising Executive Award, recognition for her rapid advancement through Pinnacle Corporation's ranks. Instead, she sat at home, terminated and unemployable, while I prepared to attend the gala with Francis Mercer. The irony was perfect. The award ceremony would become the stage for our final act of exposure. The public revelation that would ensure Charles and Vera's professional destruction was complete and permanent. Francis picked me up at 7, looking elegant in a black cocktail dress that suggested confidence rather than mourning. She'd spent the week coordinating with Patricia Hendricks, the compliance director, and several board members who wanted the full story presented to the business community. Are you ready for this? She asked as we drove downtown. I've been ready for months. The question is whether the audience is ready for what we're going to tell them. The grand ballroom buzzed with conversation as executives mingled before dinner. I recognized faces from Vera's corporate events, colleagues who'd envied her rapid advancement, competitors who'd wondered how she'd gained such quick access to senior leadership, board members who'd approved promotions based on Charles's enthusiastic recommendations. Tonight, they'd learn exactly how those recommendations were earned. Patricia Hendricks approached our table during the cocktail hour, carrying a folder thick with investigation results. The audit is complete, she said quietly. 5 women over 7 years. All junior executives, all promoted after private mentoring relationships with Charles. The pattern is undeniable. What about the financial irregularities? Systematic misuse of corporate resources, hotel suites, restaurant charges, travel expenses, all disguised as legitimate business costs. We're talking about nearly $200,000 in unauthorized spending. Francis nodded grimly. And the legal exposure? The company's attorneys are reviewing options, civil suits for fraud, potential criminal charges for embezzlement. Charles picked the wrong corporation to run his personal dating service through. The evening's program began with dinner and networking awards. I watched familiar faces from Vera's professional circle, wondering how many had suspected the truth, how many had chosen to look the other way rather than ask uncomfortable questions. When the Rising Executive Award category was announced, the presenter, David Chen from the Chamber of Commerce, looked uncomfortable. Due to recent developments, this year's recipient is unable to attend. Instead, we'd like to address some important issues about professional ethics and workplace relationships. Francis stood, walking to the podium with the confidence of someone who'd spent her career in courtrooms and boardrooms. The audience fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Good evening. I'm Francis Mercer, and I'm here to discuss what happens when mentorship becomes manipulation, when career advancement is tied to personal compromise, and when corporate resources are used to facilitate predatory behavior. She clicked a remote, and the large screen behind her displayed a timeline of Charles's mentoring relationships. Names were redacted, but the pattern was clear: junior female executives, rapid promotions, unexplained expenses, and systematic abuse of power. Over the past 7 years, a senior executive at one of our city's most prominent corporations used his position to coerce intimate relationships with female employees. He promised career advancement in exchange for personal loyalty, used corporate funds to facilitate these arrangements, and maintained a system of manipulation that destroyed careers, marriages, and lives. The audience was riveted. Cell phones appeared as people began recording, sharing, posting to social media. This wasn't just a local scandal. It was a cautionary tale about corporate culture and accountability. I stood and joined Francis at the podium, carrying my own folder of evidence. I'm Malcolm Weston. My wife was one of the women victimized by this system. For 2 years, I watched her career advance at an impossible pace, wondered how she'd gained such rapid access to senior leadership, and questioned why her success required so many private meetings and weekend conferences. I clicked to the next slide: hotel receipts, corporate credit card statements, location data that painted a picture of systematic deception. The truth is that her advancement wasn't based on merit or talent. It was based on her willingness to participate in arrangements that violated corporate policy, professional ethics, and basic human decency. The room was completely silent now, the only sound the clicking of phone cameras as people documented every word. But here's what makes this story particularly disturbing, Francis continued. When these relationships were discovered, the perpetrator's first instinct wasn't confession or apology. It was to frame innocent spouses for corporate fraud, to shift blame and avoid consequences by destroying other people's lives. She displayed the next slide: documentation of Charles's plan to implicate me in financial irregularities, evidence that showed how thoroughly he'd prepared to sacrifice others to protect himself. This is what predatory behavior looks like in corporate environments. It's not just about inappropriate relationships, it's about the systematic abuse of power, the manipulation of vulnerable employees, and the willingness to destroy anyone who threatens the arrangement. The presentation continued for 20 minutes, methodically dismantling Charles's reputation while exposing the broader cultural problems that had enabled his behavior. By the time we finished, the audience was stunned into silence. Then the questions began. What actions has Pinnacle Corporation taken? Complete termination of the executive involved, full audit of all related promotions and expenses, implementation of new policies to prevent similar abuse. What about the women who were victimized? That's their story to tell, if they choose to tell it. Our goal tonight was to ensure that the truth was public, that the pattern was exposed, and that other corporations understand the importance of vigilant oversight. What happens next? Francis and I exchanged glances. Justice, she said simply. Legal consequences for fraud and embezzlement. Professional consequences that ensure this individual never again has the opportunity to abuse corporate power, and personal consequences that reflect the true cost of betraying trust. As we left the podium, the audience erupted in discussion. Business cards were exchanged, contacts were made, and the story began spreading through professional networks with viral intensity. My phone buzzed with notifications, LinkedIn posts, Twitter mentions, news outlets requesting interviews. Within hours, the story would be regional news. By tomorrow, it would be a case study in corporate accountability. Francis and I walked to the hotel bar, where we ordered drinks and watched the continuing aftermath through social media feeds. How do you feel? She asked. Like justice, I said. Finally. We sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other through betrayal and created something like redemption through truth. Outside, the city lights sparkled like promises. Somewhere across town, Vera was probably watching the social media explosion, realizing that her professional reputation was now permanently destroyed. Charles was likely consulting attorneys, preparing for legal battles that would consume whatever remained of his career and fortune. But here, in this moment, Francis and I had accomplished exactly what we'd set out to do. We'd exposed the truth, protected future victims, and ensured that betrayal carried the consequences it deserved. The story was over. Justice was served. And for the first time in months, I could finally sleep peacefully. Some games, as Francis had said, have permanent consequences. Tonight, Charles and Vera learned exactly what those consequences looked like when played out on the public stage they'd both craved so desperately. The awards ceremony continued around us, but the real award had already been delivered. The satisfaction of truth prevailing over deception, accountability over manipulation, and justice over betrayal. Our work was complete.